recent live workshop I led on personal branding, I kicked things off by sharing 3 definitions of a personal brand. I started with Jeff Bezos' infamous definition. Jeff says, a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Think about that for a moment. It's powerful, isn't it? Imagine the conversations that are happening about you, your boss and your boss's boss, when it's time for promotions. What do they say and what do they think when your name comes up in conversation and you're not there to guide them? Are they speaking about your leadership, your creativity, your dependability? Well, that's your brand. Then I highlighted the second definition. This is the definition that Seth Godin shared with me when I interviewed him for Talk About Talk episode number 171, Making a Ruckus. This definition really struck a chord with me. Seth says that your brand is what people think you're going to do next. Wow, let that sink in for a minute. Your brand isn't just about what you've done or who you are right now. It's about expectations and your future, your potential. Here's a challenge. Take out a sheet of paper and in one column, write down what you want to do next, your goals and your aspirations. In the second column, write down what you think other people expect you to do next. Are these 2 lists aligned? If not, then there's real work to do. This is where the fun begins. The gap between those 2 lists is where your brand needs some serious attention. So back to the definitions of personal branding that I shared in this workshop. Finally, I shared a third definition, my own definition of personal branding, which isn't really about a thought exercise. It's more about action. Here's how I define personal branding. Personal branding is about being yourself on purpose. Being yourself, your true, authentic, unique, and best self, and on purpose, as in unapologetically, deliberately, and strategically managing your brand. It's about being disciplined and stepping into your story with intention and owning it. You are the author of your personal brand. One of the most powerful ways of doing this is to think specifically about controlling your narrative. And that is exactly what we're covering today in this episode. I'm going to walk you through 3 impactful ways to control your narrative and steer your professional identity. Trust me, these strategies can transform the way people perceive you. Are you ready to get started?
Let's do this. Let's talk about talk.
Welcome to Talk About Talk podcast episode 182. 3 ways to control your narrative and steer your professional identity. Hi there. In case we haven't met, I'm Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, Executive Communication Coach at Talk About Talk. But please, just call me Andrea. My mission is to coach executives and professionals like you to communicate with confidence, establish credibility, and achieve your career goals. I'm here to help you take charge of your narrative and own your story. And I couldn't be more excited to share this episode with you. You can learn more about me and what I do on the talkabouttalk.com website, where you'll find details about my one-on-one private coaching, small group boot camps, keynote speeches, and corporate workshops. I've also put together some amazing free resources for you there, like the Archetypes quiz and the personal brand assessment. They're all on the website, and I'll leave links in the show notes so you can dive in. All right, let's do this. Let's talk about how to control your narrative and steer your professional identity exactly where you want it to go. After working with hundreds, maybe thousands of executives, I've identified 3 ways that you can control your narrative in a disciplined and strategic way. Here they are. 1, introduce yourself with purpose. 2, reframe perceived weaknesses as assets. And 3, narrating your career transitions and your career journey. Let's break these down, starting with the first one, introducing yourself with purpose. Here's the thing. The most direct way to control your narrative and reinforce your brand is by introducing yourself with purpose. Let me be clear. Your self-introduction is the cornerstone of your personal brand. It's the most direct way that you can reinforce your identity. It is your words about you, from you. It's your chance to own your story and reinforce exactly how you want to be perceived. If there's one thing you focus on in taking control of your narrative, make it your self-introduction. Got it? If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you probably know that the #1 most downloaded episode of this podcast of all time is the one where I explain the 3-point self-introduction framework. It's resonated with so many people because it's simple, it's actionable, and it's effective. In fact, I recently re-released this episode as number 170, and if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend it. This framework was also featured in an August 2022 Harvard Business Review, hbr.org article. And in 2023, it was one of the 3 most downloaded articles on hbr.org. That is how powerful this topic is. It is a game changer. Here is your quick recap of the framework. The first step is present, as in present tense. This is where you share your name and what you do. For example, hi. My name is Chris, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer at the bank. Straightforward, right? Who you are and what you do. You can add more about your personal brand if you like, but otherwise, you go to the second step, and this is past tense. This is where you establish credibility. You might talk about how long you've been in your role, you might highlight your credentials, or talking about an award you just won. Think about what points will reinforce your credibility in that particular context. The third and final step is future, as in future tense. This is where you can inject some energy and enthusiasm. Share a statement about what you're looking forward to. For example, I'm really looking forward to get to know you better and to work together on this project. Or if you're in a job interview, you could say, I'm excited to learn more about this position because based on what I've heard, I think I might be a great fit. The beauty of this 3-point framework is that it's simple, yet endlessly adaptable. And here's the magic. Within each of these 3 steps, you can weave in the elements of your personal brand that you want to highlight. Let me show you how this works with an example, okay? Imagine you're trying to establish yourself as a strong people leader. In the present step, you could say, hi, my name is Alex, and I lead a team of 26 in the finance department. In the past step, you could mention maybe a successful program that you launched to develop your team's skills. And in the future step, you could say, I'm passionate about helping my team members thrive, and I'm really looking forward to helping them achieve even more. Do you see how this reinforces your strength of being a strong people leader in every step? Let me give you another example. This one is personal, okay? I'm often asked to introduce myself to HR leaders who are considering me for executive coaching or for corporate workshops. Before I introduce myself, I consciously think, I pause, and I ask myself, what aspects of my personal brand, my professional identity, do I want to emphasize in this context? Maybe it's my academic background paired with my high energy. So I might say something like, people tell me that my workshops are uniquely engaging and impactful, thanks to my academic training and the energy that I bring to the stage. That's not just an introduction. It's a narrative that reinforces exactly who I am. So here's your homework. Make a list of 3 to 5 strengths or superpowers that define you. Then, depending on the context, incorporate them into your self-introduction using the present, past, future framework. Trust me, this simple exercise can do wonders for your personal brand. Okay, so that is the first way to control your narrative. Let's move on to the second strategy, and this one is a game changer. It's called reframing your perceived weaknesses as assets. We all have something we perceive as a weakness, don't we? Something we hide. But here's the thing. Often these so-called weaknesses can be reframed as strengths. I've seen this transformation happen time and time again with my clients, and the results can be life-changing. Let me tell you a story. A while ago, I met a mixed-race gentleman who shared this with me. He said he was exhausted with people constantly asking him, "Where are you from?" You know that question, right? He was frustrated. "I'm Canadian," he'd reply. His grandparents were from 4 different continents, and it seemed to invite lots of questions. Instead of letting that frustration fester, we worked on a new narrative. Now, when people ask him where he's from, he smiles and he says, "My ancestry is a mix of Irish, Scottish, Spanish, and Indian. I also travel extensively for work and for pleasure, so I bring a truly global perspective to my leadership style." Drop the mic, right? Powerful. He turned what felt like a nuisance into a compelling part of his brand story. Here's another example that hits close to my heart. I was hosting a big Q&A focused on personal branding. A brave woman raised her hand and shared with us that she's a lawyer and she's tired of being known as an immigrant. She said she wanted to change her brand, but she wasn't sure how. Here's what I said to her. "Based on your accent, am I right in detecting that you might be from India?" "Yes," she nodded. "Well, here's the thing. We all have accents. They just become more noticeable when our accent is different from other people around us. But your English is very clear, and the research shows that as long as we can understand each other, an accent is not a bad thing. And in your case, your accent may actually be an asset." I paused. She raised her eyebrows. She didn't believe me. I continued. "You said you're a lawyer. What kind of law?" "Corporate." "Where do you practice law?" "New York." "Okay." I thought about it for a moment. And then I said, "Here's how you can introduce yourself and reinforce your new personal brand. I am a corporate lawyer in Manhattan with global experience." Boom. And here's the thing. Your accent serves as evidence of your valuable global experience. Now your accent is an asset. It's a good thing. How does that sound? Well, I don't think I've ever seen a bigger smile on anyone's face. She was thrilled. Here's another story. A CEO that I coached. This CEO spoke at warp speed. People struggled to keep up, and they'd often ask for clarification. Instead of seeing this speed talking as a flaw, we reframed it. Now, when the CEO introduces themselves, they say, "I think fast and I speak fast. This is how my brain works. But please let me know if you need me to slow down." Anyway, suddenly their rapid speech became a reflection of their high IQ and their agility. All right, here's another one that's common. Something that some people perceive as a weakness. It's being an introvert. Now, I want to make this clear. Introverts are no worse and no better than extroverts. But I know many people who are introverts who tell me that they would rather be an extrovert. My answer to that is that we should all be our true, authentic, best selves. And we should also control our narratives. So, if you are an introvert, I encourage you to steal these insights. Go for it. To start, introverts are typically fantastic listeners. So if you're an introvert, you could make this part of your brand. You could say something like, "I'm an introvert and my superpower is my listening. I am able to catch things that others might miss." Or if you're an introvert, you could also reference the fact that while I don't say much, when I do, people lean in and they listen. Do you got that? Okay. Here's another example of a perceived weakness, your sense of humor. I know this sounds like a strange one, but I've actually come across this one a few times now with my clients. I've had a few clients who told me that they try to hide their sense of humor, especially at work. One was a global chief of staff, and the other was a psychiatrist. One of them referenced their sense of humor as a wicked sense of humor. They both tried to conceal their desire to crack jokes, at least when they were at work. After working with each of these individuals on their personal brand narrative, they both ended up focusing on their unique ability to bring levity to otherwise negative situations and contexts. Of course, they checked their sense of humor at the door when it wasn't appropriate, but they also had a unique talent for establishing camaraderie, encouraging joy, and like I said, bringing levity to otherwise dire situations. Suddenly, their sense of humor became their superpower. It's very empowering. I love it. Do you see the pattern here? What you perceive as a weakness might actually be your secret weapon. Whether it's your unique ancestry, your accent, your personality, your introvertedness, your extrovertedness, your sense of humor, whatever it is, I could go on. It's all about framing. So, here's my challenge for you. Think about something that you've been trying to hide. Can you turn that into an asset? If you're not sure, talk to someone that you trust. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see the potential in what you've been holding back. I bet that you can turn your perceived weakness, your liability, into an asset. Okay, now we've covered introducing yourself with purpose and reframing perceived weaknesses as assets. Now, let's talk specifically about narrating your career transitions. Whether you're meeting someone for coffee, at a networking event, or interviewing for a job, how you tell the story of your career matters a lot. And let's face it, talking about your career transitions can feel tricky. But with a little strategy, you can turn them into powerful moments of connection. Here's the framework I teach my clients for narrating career transitions. I call it the 3 T's: talent, timeline, and tomorrow. So first, talent. When sharing the story of their career transition, many people start with the past, and they're often negative. They start listing everything wrong with their past employer, their position, what they didn't like about their boss and their colleagues. Sound familiar? Instead, start with you. Start with your talents and strengths. What makes you unique? What's your superpower? This anchors your story in who you are, not what happened to you. So, for example, you could say, I thrive in fast-paced environments where I can lead change. Or you could say, I've always been known for my ability to build strong collaborative teams. Then, once you've established your brand and your talents, you can start to tell the story. That's step 2, timeline. Here, you share a tight, positive summary of your career journey. Highlight only the moments that matter and do not dwell on negativity. Whether you're gainfully employed and curious about other opportunities, or perhaps you got fired or canned, keep your message professional and positive, or at least neutral. While it's tempting, avoid blaming and avoid venting. Do not criticize past bosses or colleagues. Do not elaborate on your frustrations, conflicts, or dissatisfaction. Do not mention grievances, blame others, or share gossip. And of course, don't ever share sensitive or confidential information. Instead of saying, I left because my boss was terrible, try, I realized I was ready for a new change and I decided to explore opportunities where I could grow. Keep it concise, keep it professional, and keep it positive. So, you've nailed your talent first, and now you've shared your timeline. Now what? Step 3 is tomorrow. Finally, end your career transition story with enthusiasm about the future. By the way, yes, this might sound familiar if you've heard me talk about the 3-point self-introduction framework, which I just introduced to you at the beginning of this episode. Here's where you share what excites you and where you're headed next. For instance, you could say, I'm really energized about finding a role where I can drive meaningful impact and continue to grow as a leader. Or you could say, I'm excited to explore opportunities in whatever the field is and see where I can make a difference. There you have it. The 3 T's framework. Do you remember what it is? Talent, timeline, and tomorrow. Start with your talent. It's not an epic story. Start with your talent. This is simple, effective, and it helps you own your story with confidence. One quick note. We need to be intentional about the language that we use to describe our transitions. Words matter. The question of how you label your transition is significant. I have a story for you. Recently, I was coaching an impressive executive who resigned from his employer of over 20 years to reset and try something completely new. Awesome, right? Well, unfortunately, he created a LinkedIn post announcing that he had retired. He meant retired from the firm, but the hundreds of folks who commented on his LinkedIn post understood that he was retiring from work altogether. Oops. Words really matter. So ask yourself, are you taking a sabbatical or a gap year? Did you get downsized or were you packaged out? Are you resetting or are you making a career pivot? Choose terms that feel authentic, but also convey strength and professionalism. Again, it is not about memorizing a script, but preparing yourself with a few words, phrases, and frameworks can work wonders. Okay, it's time to wrap up. Let's recap. We talked about 3 powerful ways that you can control your narrative. Steer your professional identity. You are the author of your personal brand. So, number 1, introduce yourself with purpose using the present, past, future framework. 2, turn your perceived weakness into an asset by reframing it as a strength. And 3, narrate your career transition with the 3 T's: talent, timeline, and tomorrow. I hope these strategies inspire you to take charge of your narrative and step into your story with confidence. Remember, your personal brand is all about being yourself on purpose. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and please share Talk About Talk with your friends. Thanks for listening and talk soon.